Mortician was never anything I thought I wanted to be growing up. But it's exactly what the ninth grade guidance counselor said I would be best at. They had just come to our ninth grade English class and made us take one of those, "What should you be when you grow up?" tests. You remember those? What sorts of answers did you get? You remember your responses or your answers? Yeah, lawyer. What else? A veterinarian. Did somebody say florist? I love it. I love it. So I got mortician my ninth grade year. The way that happened is that the guidance counselors passed out these tests. We had to answer all the questions on the test, hand our test back in. And a week later, the guidance counselors would come back to English class and distribute the results. At the time, they called us to the front of the classroom one at a time in alphabetical order. My last name starts with a G, so I didn't have too long to wait to find out what I should be when I grow up. They called my name. I came to the front of the classroom, and the way this worked is you got a list on a piece of paper of 10 professions you would be best at. They called my name. I came to the front of the classroom and froze in my tracks. There in the number one top position, the thing I would be best at was one word: mortician. Now, all my friends around me were getting normal answers, similar to the ones you've voiced here. People were getting things like doctor, accountant, teacher, salesperson, firefighter, all normal stuff. I got mortician. And so I walked from the front of the classroom directly to the trash can and deposited my test results. I went back to my seat and vowed to myself to dismiss this whole event, this whole experience from my memory. 10th grade year, those guidance counselors came back and they made us take the test again. So I answered all the questions. I turned in the responses. A week later, they came back to English class, called us to the front of the classroom one at a time to give us our test results. My 10th grade year, I got my list of 10, and at the top of the list of 10 things I'd be best at, mortician. Second year in a row. I walked from the front of the classroom to the trash can and promptly buried my test results. Again, I vowed to dismiss this experience from my memory. They came back a third year in a row to English class my junior year. I answered all the questions, turned in my results. They came back a week later, called us to the front of the classroom. The top of the list my junior year, one word: mortician. 3 damn years in a row. I walked to the trash can and left the results there. The senior year of high school, same drill, so I knew it. They came in, gave us the test. I answered the questions, turned it in. They came back a week later. This time, though, I decided I would answer those questions differently. They came back a week later with our test results, called us to the front of the classroom, and my senior year, the top of the list of 10, finally. One word: damn it. It was mortician again. Now, I knew that I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to study business. I knew really that I was interested in marketing. And so I went off to college from Ohio over to Southern Indiana, took as many business classes as I could in marketing in particular. I took a few music classes just for fun. My senior year of college, I moved from Indiana to downtown Philadelphia, to Center City, Philadelphia, for a marketing internship. And about 2 weeks into that marketing internship, I learned a really, really valuable marketing lesson. And it was this: I hate marketing. I'd spent my entire college career getting ready for marketing vocation and learned quickly, this is not what I want to do. I finished the internship that semester. I moved back to Indiana for the final semester of college. About a week before graduating, with no plan in place about what I was going to do after graduating, in a moment of sheer weakness, I decided to take one of these tests again to see what I should be when I grow up. It was computerized by this time, so I didn't have to wait a week for test results. I answered all the questions on the screen. I hit submit. I waited for the screen to produce the answers, and it produced a list of 10 things I would be best at. The top of the list, one word: mortician. 8 years of being told the thing I would be best at is working with death. Do you know what that does to one's ego? I went to mortuary school that fall. I finished mortuary school. I took my state and national boards and started working as a licensed funeral director and embalmer in the state of Ohio. One of the first funerals that I ever did as a funeral director was for the retired fire chief in the small community where I was living and working. I had met with the fire chief's family to make all of the funeral arrangements, got the chief ready for the day of the service. We expected a big crowd for the retired chief's funeral service, and so the service took place at the church in town. It was indeed a big, big crowd. It was a lovely service. A lot of folks stood and shared stories, gave testimonies, great music. It was a good service, if I do say so. At the end of the service, then, it would be my job to drive the hearse and lead the procession from the church to the cemetery. I'd never been to this particular cemetery before, and so I remember saying to my boss, the man who owned the funeral home and who signed my paychecks, said to him, "I don't know where this cemetery is that we're going to be going to." And he said to me, "You don't need to. We've got 12 big red fire trucks that will be our escort. Just follow the big red truck in front of you." So we finished the service in the church. The pallbearers carried the casket out to the hearse, loaded the chief into the back end of the coach. We all got in our cars, and it was time to head to the cemetery. I remembered that my boss had said to me, "Just follow the big red fire truck in front of you." My boss would be driving the family in the limousine in the number 2 position, so right behind me in the hearse. There were about 80 cars in procession that day. We began to pull out of the parking lot at the church and head through town in procession with all 12 big red fire trucks escorting us through every single intersection. It was really impressive. Traffic pulled over, traffic slowed down, people stopped, people got out of their cars and gave it this. It was great. We got to the main intersection in the middle of town, and the big red fire truck in front of me turned right. And so I turned right. And just as soon as I turned right in the lead car, I noticed that the other 11 big red fire trucks had gone straight. And all I could think to myself was, "Oh shit. I believe we're about to respond to the scene of an emergency. And the chief isn't going to be much help." I panicked and realized I had no idea where we were going, nor did I have any idea how to get there. This was before cell phones, and so this is a horrifying, horrifying moment. Not only do I have the man who signs my paychecks in the car behind me, we've got 80 carloads of mourners following me to a place I don't know how to get to and have never been to before. I didn't know what else to do, and in a moment of panic, I happened to look into the mirror on the driver's side door of the hearse, and I could see my boss driving the limo right behind me, beginning to give me hand gestures. I wasn't exactly sure what kind of hand gestures or which finger he was using, but I began to recognize he's giving me directions. He's trying to tell me where to go. Took me a moment to figure out if I was seeing a mirror image or if the way he was pointing was really, in fact, the right direction. But it looked as though he was saying, turn here, turn here. And the only place to turn here was into a bank parking lot. Now, the funeral, I didn't tell you, the funeral took place on a Saturday morning. Before direct deposit was a big thing. And so on Saturday mornings, some of you know this already, on Saturday mornings, lots of people went to the bank to deposit their own paycheck. And so as my boss is saying, turn here into the bank parking lot, I panicked and did exactly what it looked like he was directing me to do. And so did all 80 cars. We drove in the bank parking lot, around the bank, everybody in the bank lobby looking like, what in the actual hell is going on? We drove out the other side of the bank parking lot onto another road, and now I'm certain I am screwed. I have no idea where we're going. My boss seemed to keep saying, keep going, keep going. That was the signal I was watching in my mirror. I kept going, and there off in the distance, I began to make out the image of what appeared to be those 11 big red fire trucks that I'd lost, or who lost me. As we got closer, I began to recognize also that that one truck that turned out of line, the one I followed, and then it sped away and left us, it had really just gone around a block or two and came to the entrance of the cemetery from the opposite direction. And what had happened was all of those fire trucks met nose to nose at the entrance to the cemetery. They'd put their ladders up and formed an arch for the entire funeral procession to drive through. We did. We got to the cemetery in grand style. We had the committal service at the cemetery. It was great. We got to the cemetery not without a little bit of sweat, not without a little bit of panic, but we got where we needed to be. I learned a couple of things that day. The first was that it's really important to recognize that thing that seems to keep following you. What is it that keeps following you? Is it a person? Is it a thing? Is it an idea, a theme, an answer from somebody? What is it? What's your mortician? What's the thing that keeps showing up in your life's journey? The second thing I learned that day was to know the difference between leading and following. I'd always thought that leading meant you're up front and everybody's behind you, and wherever you go, they'll go too. And that following meant somebody's in front of you and you just go where they go. What I learned that day was that sometimes you have to follow from up front. Sometimes others are leading from behind. It's how I got to the cemetery. The third thing I learned that day was to figure out, what are your big red fire trucks? What are the things that promise you they'll get you where you're trying to go and then maybe disappear from your sight and then reappear later on? What are your big red fire trucks? Now, all three of these things served me really, really well when I began to recognize a call to ordained ministry as a gay man in the United Methodist Church. Not exactly a good feeling. As I began to recognize this call to ministry and kept saying to myself over and over, oh shit, I can't do this. They won't let me do this. I began to recognize, what's my mortician? What's that thing that kept following me and wouldn't go away? And for me, it was this sense of call to ministry. All I could do was just recognize it. As I began to live into and start to accept this call to ordained ministry in the United Methodist Church, I started looking for my big red fire trucks. Who were the people who said, "We believe in you. We believe you can do this. We'll walk with you. We'll help you get to where you've never been before." And of those people, who were the ones who then fell out of my sight, who kind of left me? And then of those, who were the ones that reappeared off in the distance? Who were the ones who kept that promise to go with me, to help me get there? As a leader in the church now, perhaps the thing that served me best from that retired fire chief's funeral was knowing the difference between leading and following. I'm no more a church expert than any of you are in this room. I don't know about you, but I've never led a church in pandemic era before. I have no idea what post-pandemic church looks like. But here's what I do know. It's going to take leading and following. And sometimes we'll lead by being up front. Sometimes we'll lead from behind. Sometimes we'll follow from being behind, and sometimes we'll follow by being up front. The only way I see our church getting better during and after the pandemic is by learning that intimate, vulnerable dance with each other, the dance that involves leading and following up front and from behind. It is, I think, the church's future. So, who's your mortician? And what's your big red fire truck? Thanks.